Oh, they're getting reframed. Kevin's wife, Robin, she's been here a few times, does that type of framing, and it sorely needs it. Look at him.
Okay. This Friday's good. Think about it. Okay. No bar for rescue. Oh. We have another week. Oh, you have to get it faster.
Good evening.
We're new.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi.
What's your names?
Kevin?
Kevin?
Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. I'm John. Do you, either one of you or both of you, have a meditation practice?
No.
Great. Glad to hear that. You're better off. See what time it is. I teach a meditation method called Shamatha-Vipassana. Shamatha means to quiet the mind. Vipassana means to gain insight from that quiet mind, from a well-concentrated mind. It's a very specific insight into the impermanent nature of all things, a deeper understanding of what constitutes a self, and how and why we create stress in the world and in our lives. I teach this meditation method as part of something called an Eightfold Path. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Even better. What is this? The reason why I say that is the Eightfold Path is part of something that a gentleman named Siddhartha Gautama taught upon his awakening when he became known as the Buddha. And those teachings have been changed drastically over the years to become a very complicated practice where it was once a very simple practice. And the only reason I say all that, and I won't get into the whole thing tonight, but meditation that we do here is part of that broader framework, the broader practice of the Eightfold Path. And each class I talk about some aspect of that framework. Tonight's talk is on developing a certain type of mindfulness that helps in developing this understanding. Beyond that, it's just enough to understand that it's not just meditation that we teach here and that we practice. The meditation method, I'll talk us into it as we start. We're going to meditate for 20 minutes tonight, which may or may not be a long time. If it becomes uncomfortable for you, just stop the method that I'll teach in just a second and just sit quietly, and then you can pick it up again. But don't force yourself to be uncomfortable. Are you comfortable sitting on the floor like that?
Yes.
Okay. There's nothing particularly significant about the meditation posture either. It's just a way to sit comfortably for the period of meditation. Well, that's enough of an introduction, I think. Tonight's talk is on the Meghiya Sutta, which is on the specific qualities of mind that develop from the refined mindfulness of the Eightfold Path that support awakening or gaining full human maturity. So we'll meditate first. So find your relaxed meditative posture. Gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And holding your back straight, but not stiff. Your ears aligned with your shoulders, nose aligned with your navel. But holding yourself very loosely, very gently, very lovingly. Allow yourselves to settle into this room. Settle onto your seats. Settle into your bodies. And settle into your minds. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body. Just get a feel for what that's like. To be mindful of your breath in your body. And while remaining mindful of your breath and your body, notice if thoughts are flowing. We're conscious beings, thoughts should be flowing. The purpose of meditation is to not be distracted by your own thoughts. So when you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. I'll repeat that. When you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. And we'll meditate for 20 minutes with callbacks every 5 minutes. relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. If a persistent thought or feeling arises, stay with it for a moment or two. Recognize it as impermanent and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. And we'll meditate for 5 more minutes. Take a moment to notice the quality of your mind. Be at peace with your mind. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Good to see you, Olivia. Welcome, Emily. So in the Meghiya Sutta, the Buddha teaches the monk Meghiya 5 qualities that bring awakening, and 5 qualities that he's lacking, based on a question that Meghiya asked the Buddha. Meghiya, having taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Buddha's Sangha, and living as a monk for a reasonable amount of time, finds himself still troubled by 3 unwholesome qualities of mind. In seclusion, the thought arises in Meghiya that it is indeed strange and remarkable. I have gone forth from home to homelessness and have been developing the Dhamma. Yet I continue to be overwhelmed by 3 troubling kinds of thoughts: sensual thoughts, malevolent thoughts, and cruel thoughts. Meghiya seeks out the Buddha one afternoon. Revered teacher, I continue to be troubled by sensual thoughts, by malevolent thoughts, and by cruel thoughts. The Buddha responds, Meghiya, when your mindfulness is not fully refined, still immature, there are 5 qualities that develop full maturity and the cessation of troubling qualities of mind. The first quality to develop are skillful and honorable friends and associations. Avoid unskillful, distracting, and troubling associations. The second quality to develop is restraint in conduct, avoiding the danger and even the slightest transgressions. Train yourself to keep all the precepts and to practice right speech, right action, and right livelihood. He's pointing Meghiya back to the Eightfold Path and re-emphasizing the importance to develop the entire framework of the Eightfold Path rather than just being in seclusion and practicing meditation. The Buddha is recognizing that because his practice isn't complete, meaning having developed the entire framework of the Eightfold Path and is more inclined towards just meditation, he's lacking the understanding of what to do even when these troublesome thoughts come up in meditation. In other words, he doesn't have the frame of reference to recognize where he's getting off track, where he's getting off the path. And that's that reference to refined mindfulness is exactly that. His mindfulness is yet not refined to the framework of the Eightfold Path. The third quality to develop is speech that is effacing and does not promote the ego self. Effacing speech relaxes the mind and conduces towards dispassion, peace, direct knowledge, unbinding, enlightenment, and nibbana. What a powerful line. It relaxes the mind. When we're not engaged, when our speech and our following actions are not engaged in constant eye-making, our minds naturally relax. They're naturally at peace because we don't have that edge of always promoting myself or protecting myself in the world. When there's no eye-making left in what we're expressing, there's no reason for stress to be felt anywhere in the body or in the mind. The fourth quality to develop is energy and right effort for abandoning unwholesome qualities and developing wholesome qualities of mind. Be vigorous and persevering with regard to wholesome qualities. The fifth quality to develop is wisdom born of penetrative knowledge of the arising and passing away of suffering. Knowledge with regard to the Four Noble Truths. That last quality is kind of an all-encompassing quality, isn't it? And it's an understanding. It's what Kandana first referenced when he first heard the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths. When he said that all conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. And the Buddha said, you understand, Kandana. You're now on a Kandana. Kandana understand on a deep and penetrative level the impermanence of all things. And so that fifth quality of mindfulness is to be continually mindful of the arising and passing away of all phenomena, and then ultimately the arising and passing away of our own thoughts, and how our thoughts are impermanent. And when we can truly understand the impermanence of our own thoughts, we recognize the futility of trying to establish ourselves in our thoughts, which is really where stress arises. When we recognize that even our own thoughts are as impermanent as foam on the ocean, we'll cease becoming enamored with our own thoughts, and we'll cease describing ourselves by our own self-referential thoughts. Is that clear? Is it exciting? I think it is.
It's straightforward when you say it like that. Straightforward.
Yeah. And that last question, is it exciting? It relates to what the Buddha was talking about, the excitement that comes from understanding that we are now engaged in right effort. We found a way to develop lasting peace and happiness. And it's entirely up to us as individuals. It's not up to any outside force. It's not developed because we're just wonderful people, although we will be. It occurs from our own direct development of the Eightfold Path. As the Buddha described himself, so are we, rightly self-awakened ones. The Buddha continues, when mindfulness is still unrefined and immature, these are the 5 qualities to be developed that lead directly to full maturity and to awakening. It is to be expected, Meghiya, that one who has skillful friends and associates, that they will be restrained in conduct and follow the precepts. Again, this is another sutta where the Buddha places such great importance on who and what we associate with. And it doesn't mean that we should only associate with excuse me, with people in our Sangha. It does mean that outside of the Dhamma, we should be very wise in who we do associate with and who we create identities by. One who has skillful friends and associates will be effacing in speech, conducing their mind towards direct knowledge and unbinding. One who has skillful friends will have the energy and the effort to abandon unwholesome qualities and develop wholesome qualities. A good example of that, having the energy, is those of us that come regularly talk about the support we get from each other, don't we? And how important, how much inspiration and energy we gather from each other. And even from the knowledge that Tuesday I'll be at Dhamma class, or Thursday or Saturday. And that helps keep our Dhamma practice focused, and it helps develop that energy, that subtle joy that comes from right associations, doesn't it? One who has skillful friends will be wise born of penetrative knowledge of the arising and passing away of suffering, knowledge with regards to the 4 Noble Truths. Furthermore, Meghiya, one who has established these 5 qualities should develop 4 additional qualities. Sensual cravings should be recognized and abandoned. Again, simple and direct teachings, aren't they? Goodwill or loving kindness, metta, should be cultivated. Again, metta, goodwill, is not something that, while it is often naturally occurring, where human beings are naturally compassionate, unless you have certain types of psychopathy, but it's something that we need to cultivate as we start developing the refined mindfulness of the Dhamma, something that we should focus on. Mindfulness of the breath should be maintained to interrupt discursive and conditioned thinking. Impermanence should be fully understood to cease I-making and understand the not-self characteristic. When the interplay between impermanence and not-self, and meaning I-making, is abandoned, suffering ends. This is nibbana, here and now, meaning awakening, full human maturity, right here and now, right in this present human lifetime. Not sometime in the future, not eons in the future, not in the next life, right here, right now. The Buddha taught a Dhamma to awaken in this lifetime, to gain full human maturity in this present life. The Buddha concludes the sutta with verse: trivial thoughts, subtle thoughts, mental reactions that continue to distract, not understanding conditioned thinking, one wanders endlessly in samsara, meaning one wanders endlessly in ignorance. Understanding the roots of ignorance, the ardent and mindful restrains ignorance. The fully awakened completely abandons thoughts the fully awake and completely abandons ignorance and the mental reactions that continue to distract. That's the end of the sutta. The mental reactions that continue to distract. Those mental reactions are rooted in ignorance. They're rooted in the continual need for eye-making. They're rooted in the continual need to have one thought follow the next self-referential thought that we all describe as that monkey mind. That's so difficult to restrain initially in meditation. But as our meditation deepens and we develop these other qualities of mind through the Eightfold Path, our mind naturally quiets and we're able to hold in mind even more deeply the entire Eightfold Path as a framework for our lives. That's the talk for tonight. Any questions directly on the talk, and then we'll go around the room? We'll start with Olivia. Olivia, good to see you tonight.
Yes, you too. A good reminder in that is the association, who we associate with. That's an important thing to remember for me. I guess that's, for me, that's all I have now. But
Thank you. Glad you're here.
thanks.
Ram, good to see you.
Good to be here again. I was just thinking how in social media you get these chances to work on your associations, because there's a lot of push and pull from whoever comes up there, but it's a way of associating with either the people that you want to be associated with, or you really don't want to have anything to do with. But it also brings up a lot of hateful thoughts as a reaction to what you see there, or lustful thoughts as a reaction to what you see there. It's like this little microcosm of human interaction that has all the pitfalls and possibilities that your so-called normal life would have.
Yeah.
But it seems to be like much more intensified.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I talked a little bit about this on Saturday, I think, maybe Thursday. The co-founder of Facebook, along with Mark Zuckerberg, and I can't think of his name, I wish I could remember. He just came out recently describing the ethical dilemma that him and Mr. Zuckerberg came up against as they were developing Facebook, because their intention was to prey on the psychological need, the compulsive psychological need to join. And he was honest about the discussions and the ramifications that him and Mark Zuckerberg had about should they even do this? Is this even morally correct? And he admitted that they basically said, we're going to make billions. Who cares? And his reason for coming out now is he's so concerned about younger people and children that can't escape social media. And he's actually saying, and I agree with him, although I'm not one that agrees on a lot of government regulations, that they need to consider regulating social media like we regulate alcohol and maybe marijuana and cigarettes. Because he's saying, the co-founder, is saying it's at least as damaging, if not more. And again, I don't want to get on a soapbox about this, but it points to the idea of association, doesn't it? And that's what they were describing. That's when they had this moral discussion between themselves, they understood the power of association and what it would do. The Buddha understood that without even looking at social media 2,600 years ago. So again, it's not to say that we shouldn't have any associations and live like hermits. It means that we should recognize who and what we're associating with. So it's not just people. We associate ourselves with ideas. We associate ourselves with objects. We associate ourselves with events, don't we? That's all aspects of a self-referential self, ego personality. And that's where we need to practice restraint. It's at that level of association. And so the reason why, and what I just said about Zuckerberg and the other gentleman exemplifies this. A mind conditioned from ignorance is always seeking to establish itself in the most convenient ways. And that the most convenient way is often not the most healthy way. It's an aspect of a self-referential ego self to ignore anything that would challenge its ignorance, and that is always the most convenient way.
And also, the algorithms are set up in such a way that you naturally end up in this miniature world where everybody boosts your ego.
Oh yeah,
And your conceit.
it's a microcosm of that feedback loop that the Buddha described, recognizing leading to his own awakening, because now we're associating with people that are doing just what we're doing and justifying it by that group mentality. And you get to the point. This is the essence of ignorance, really, because now you've willfully engaged in a strategy to continue to ignore your own ignorance based on what a small group of people, relatively small group of people, are doing. Everybody's doing the same thing. And you get a nearly infinite number of these pockets of association that are all feeding off of each other. And they all feel justified because of the self-reference that they've gained by their little association.
And they would use the word friend.
Isn't excuse me.
Like.
Exactly, Helen. And so how can you, once you've said that this is my friend, you'll no longer look at that anymore, will you? Because they're your friends. And I like them and they like me. And I was shocked when I wish I could think of his name now, when he actually admitted to doing this. But he's utilizing something that the Buddha recognized 2,500 years ago, the need for a self-referential ego self to ignore anything that would challenge its own ignorance. And that's the basic problem. So as we develop the framework of the Eightfold Path, the entire framework allows us to recognize skillful and unskillful associations. Are we furthering right view, right intention? Am I engaged in right speech, right action, and right livelihood, or am I not? And so what do we do when we find that we're acting in unskillful ways? The Buddha teaches us what to do. We don't analyze it. We don't try to blame anybody else or ourselves. We simply recognize it and mindfully abandon it. Excuse me. That's the essence of mindfulness, or the essence of refined mindfulness. So thank you for getting me going a little bit on that. Tim, good to see you.
Good to see you, John. Good to see everybody. I don't want to respond to that, John, the Facebook thing, because I kind of disagree a little bit with it. But
you can disagree
on that. But essentially, from your teachings and from reading the Eightfold Path, I think it's quite obvious what social media is. It's not a big secret. It's just you can choose not to go on Facebook and interact in that phony friend environment, because if you can have 3 or 4 good friends in your life, you're lucky. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And
right.
Anybody who has 2,000 friends, good luck. Keeping all that organized. But getting back to the sutta, one thing that I'm glad it's almost like you read my mind. I was kind of thinking about those things today. With work, sometimes it's hard to choose the people you do business with. and that can be very challenging. You deal with many people. I deal with many people all over the world, and some of which I don't particularly care for. But there's the quote unquote business, and then there's the outside of business relationships. And I recently had to make a decision where I said, I can't do business with you because I just don't, it doesn't feel right. I don't like where you're going with this. And it costs you money. And I often feel that it can be you have to be very careful, because as you develop this compassion and this flexibility, certain people will see that and try to take advantage of it. And that's a fear I have. And I think I talked about it last week. It's an irrational fear, because it's based on your ego, because you don't want to be taken advantage of, because you have an ego. So I'm having a hard time grasping how to handle those situations where my ego is challenged or taken advantage of, and how to respond. So that's to kind of help a little bit, but I'm still kind of working it out.
Thank you. Initially, it's a difficult struggle between thinking you need to be assertive in a certain way in order to protect your own interests. And what you're describing is recognizing developing the understanding of the entire framework of the Eightfold Path. And initially, it creates some of these moral dilemmas. When I first came across the Eightfold Path, and I understood right speech and I understood right action, and I came across right livelihood, my initial thought was, why is this even here? Isn't right livelihood covered by right speech and right action? And as I learned a little bit more and read about the circumstances under which the Buddha taught, which are very similar today, right livelihood was there because the Buddha recognized that otherwise good and honest men and women would compromise right speech and right action when it took time to put food on the table for the kids. And even in the sutta, the Buddha says even the slightest transgression is still taking us off the path. So in the business world, we're in the business world to make money, but the Eightfold Path still guides that. And eventually you get to the point where even that moral dilemma is no longer a dilemma, because you're living your life framed by the Eightfold Path, and it's just a natural expression. Your business life is the same as the rest of your life as far as the ethics of it. And you'll often find that people that you were doing business with for maybe a long time, they may be lacking in certain ethics, and you just stop it. Years and years ago, I was in a particular situation in a roofing business with a partner. I very rarely had partners in my business life. And I was astonished how much money we were actually making at the time. But then I quickly saw how we were doing it. And it lasted 6 months. I just couldn't. First, I tried to change the partner, and obviously that didn't work. And you just have to leave, And it wasn't even a big deal at that point, because it wasn't a wrong way to make a living. It was just simply wrong. It was unskillful. You can't do those things. But just as an example, this guy was well known in his community. He was actually a really nice guy, except when it came to making money. And when it came to making money, he would do anything. He even talked about that. He said, I grew up in a depression, and I'll never let that happen to me or my family again. So there was that aversion that drove him to act in very unethical ways. The framework of the Eightfold Path is a middle way between extreme views, but it puts a very fine point on the way we act and the way we talk.
Can I ask you,
Sure.
on that decision that you made, there's a fine line. There's the middle way, there's the extremes of making a lot of, like really raking somebody over the coals and not making any money, right? And then there's the middle of making what market share, market value, whatever the other roofers are charging. Was he
gouging people? Is that what you're saying, or was it just the fact
It wasn't just that. He was engaged in he was able to gouge people because of his reputation. For one thing, he had a position in the larger business community that brought a lot of people to him. It was somewhat complicated, but he also, I don't want to get into a whole long explanation. He engaged in questionable behavior to increase the bottom line, where there, again, I don't want to get into a whole other discussion. There's even the thought within the business, anybody that's had a business understands this. There's a belief in the business community in general that because it's so ruthless, you need to be aggressive in certain ways in order to survive. And that just doesn't reconcile with what the Buddha taught. In other words, so to put it simply, I found that I could make a living wage by having ethics too. And it allowed me to live with a much more peaceful mind, which is really the point. It wasn't so much that this particular person or other business people are unethical. How does it make me feel? At the end of the day, what happens when I sit down to meditate? Is my mind churning about the next way that I can squeeze an extra 10 cents out of something? Or am I sitting here to meditate? Because that's a part of my life that's taken care of by the framework of the Eightfold Path. In other words, it doesn't take up a lot of my thinking. I'm sorry for getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but thank you for bringing that up. Andrew, good to see you tonight.
This sutta is new, and I'm absorbing it via the conversations that are around me, so I'm not prepared to actually say anything at this point, so I'll pass.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Andrew. Kevin, welcome to our Sangha. I know this might be a little bit out of context what we're talking about, but how was your meditation tonight?
Nice. I'm just looking for a way to relieve some stress in my life, so I'm gonna give this a shot.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. This will do it. The first noble truth is there is dukkha. Dukkha is a Pali word that translates very nicely into there is stress. And so the Buddha recognized 2,600 years ago the common problem of human stress, its causes, and how to bring it to cessation. So I hope you continue to come and you'll learn a little bit more about the broader strategies of the Eightfold Path. So, Sarah, welcome to our Sangha. How was your meditation?
Thank you. It was interesting. It's certainly interesting. I think I started off really good, and then I got lost in there, and then I got, it's like there's a landscape in there, and wander around quite a bit, which I'm used to. I shouldn't say I have no experience with meditation. I have a little bit. I never felt that I did it very well, and it's certainly been a pretty long time, but yeah, it's weird how this is a thing that I've been trying to reestablish and maybe start practicing in my life for probably the last couple of years. And it just never happens. It just never happens. Like we have a little baby and it's the first thing to fall off. Like as are many things for my mental health are the first things that fall out of the schedule when people need to be fed or whatever. Yeah. It just falls. It's just, I don't know. It's a thing that's been going on for a long time that I've been really aware of and not doing anything about, and it's just been clawing at me. I noticed the other day, I think it was maybe today, maybe yesterday, I was just randomly realized that I spend probably 65 to 70% of my mental, just use that space concerned with what other people think of me. Mm-hmm. And I knew that, I knew it, but then, it's like there are these times when I'm like, God, what would my life be like if I got to use that for stuff that was really enjoyable? What would that be like? Because that's really the only, I mean, that's where I live most of the time, is in between. You know, it's just, there's a lot, and the concepts that you spoke about, of course, there's, you know, the particulars and the names and all that stuff is really foreign to me, but there were quite a few things that were like resonating. And yeah, it's just a lot, you know. You just, it's nice to know, to realize that there's, of course, you know, there's freedom from that. And
Oh, yeah.
you know, there is. And it's, do you know, it's like, these are the choices that I make on a daily basis. And you know, the breathing, it felt like nourishment. And I've been realizing, like in the last 2 weeks, that I have this pain in my side. And if I lay down and I breathe, it feels better. And I'm like, are there spots of my body that aren't getting breath at all? You know, like I think there are a lot of spots that just are like dark, little, cold, hard, crystallized, like mean spots. They don't get any breath and they're just cranky all the time. So it's just, you know, we're sitting here and we're breathing. I can't do it for that long when I'm by myself because I start feeling like people need to be fed. But it was nice. It's just nice. It's nice to be here. I don't know that we might have to like run out the door pretty soon because we have to put the baby to bed. Is that rude?
Absolutely not.
Okay, because that's just the reality right now. But it's really good to be here. I'm glad we made it.
I'm glad you made it. It's really good to have you here. We're kind of all chuckling in familiarity about the things that you're saying. We've all been there. That what you described as being preoccupied with how other people are perceiving you is the essence of a self-referential ego personality. It's the basic human problem. It's part of that feedback loop that we all get caught up in. And unless we have a framework for recognizing that and ending that, which is what the Eightfold Path is, meditation being a part of it, there's no way to get out of it. But this is a direct way. And pretty quickly you start recognizing that. So I hope you can continue to join us. Please feel free whenever you have to leave. On the website becoming-buddha.com, at the top of the page, there's it says guided meditations, and there's from 5 minutes to 45 minutes of this meditation that you can use to guide your meditation. And there's articles and talks about developing the Eightfold Path. There's a page also linked at the top for new visitors. It'll kind of get you going in the right direction. But I hope you can continue to join us here. The most important aspect of developing a meditation practice is to be part of a well-focused Sangha. And we're fortunate to have that here. So welcome to both of you. Gail, good to see you tonight.
Good to be here. I did take a long break from here, but I feel like all the teachings, I'm so grateful for the teachings of the 3.5 years or 4 years that I came. And I feel like it's something that you really do keep with you all the time. And even when I wasn't here, I kept up my meditation. Sometimes it was only 5 or 10 minutes, but it still felt good to have that 5 minutes even when I was rushed for time. But if I feel like the contentment is there so much, and if it's not a little bit, then I can like think, you know, I go back to the teachings and where is my ego involved in this, or what do I want to be different than how things are or something, and it gives a good reference or a good way to look at it. It's just really, it's been so helpful, and it's a great thing that you just carry with you, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Recognizing the I-making in the moment, the ego in the moment is really the essence of the teaching. So thank you for saying that. One more thing, as you begin to develop your own meditation practice, start with short meditation sessions. 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes is more than enough to begin a practice or reinvigorate a practice. If you start with too long, thinking that you have to meditate for 20 minutes, unless that's comfortable for you, you're just going to get frustrated with that. So short periods of meditation.
And be gentle with yourself, right?
And always,
so important.
Always be
Yeah.
gentle. Yeah, don't judge yourself harshly. Yeah, don't judge the practice. As long as you're engaged in the method. So you both were able to engage in the method. You found, you recognized when you were caught up in your thoughts and you came back to your breathing. That's the basic practice, and everything else builds off of that. So, thank you, Kat. Helen, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here with everyone. I was thinking about something that Tim said about business practices. I'm a business owner, and if I get an uneasy feeling as I'm meeting with a client, the expression I use is, well, let's just see if we're a good fit for each other. And then that just sort of opens the door for further conversation if they're not comfortable with me or I'm not comfortable with them. But if it works out, I feel that the work that I do is good livelihood. And if I'm not judging that other person, I feel like I can have a good livelihood in that moment. But I say this every week, I think. I just love that if you are following the Eightfold Path, people notice that there's something different about you. Yep. And it has an effect. And so I'm very, very grateful for the Eightfold Path and how it's really guided me through a lot of different things in my life, and really it's been very valuable to me. So, and tonight's sutta was just really a different way of talking about the Eightfold Path. So I'm very, very grateful for it.
Thank you, Helen. The ethics you're describing in your business practice are really just a natural development of it in that way. It's not something you have to effort at too much. Take care, Kevin. Take care, Sarah. Good to see you. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Mary Beth, good to see you.
Good to be here, John. My practice is consistently spotty. And it's the same, I just keep coming back to the same thought that I think is a valuable thought, that it's working on having my priority be on what I know is the most important thing. Because like Sarah was expressing, I live in that world of, there's more to do, feed, person, organize, and I know it's foolish, so at least there's that awareness.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing because I asked a question a few weeks ago when I was here, because of the meditation retreat, you said something about late at night is not the ideal time to meditate, but I at least had that consistent, I'm just meditating every night, it's the thing I did before I went to bed, right? But now that I stopped altogether, because I'm like, oh no, that's not John said so the right time.
I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, if I use it inside timer, someone might see that I'm meditating. But anyway, I am working on establishing earlier meditation time. But in the meantime, just coming back to being here, consistently, and it just, I'm just taking steps.
Good. I'm glad you made it tonight. Yeah, and let me adapt that. If the only time you have to meditate is right before bed, that's great. But it's best if it's a little earlier. You sent an email earlier today for specific volunteer. Mary Beth is a principal at the Rare Art and Learning Cooperative and our ongoing Dhamma project, and you have an immediate need for someone who could cook, who could teach a cooking class, desserts. I was hoping Frank was here, maybe, but also you had a few others.
Well, it's an invitation really. So the Dhamma dinner is next Tuesday night.
Yeah, week from tonight.
Already, and I just was talking with John and Matt about being at the Dhamma dinner and invite our families and volunteers. But we have a cooking class on Monday morning that the kids cook, and I thought, wouldn't that be cool if we could bring something, for them. And then wouldn't it even be cooler if someone from our Sangha could come in, because it's all volunteer based, not all, but the classes are led generally by volunteers, and the cooking class doesn't have it's like every week we have, a visiting cooking person. So that was it. So if anyone has next Monday morning from about 9 to 11 in Flemington, you want to come and bake cookies or something with the kids.
Great.
So.
You hear that, Frank? Thanks very much. Bonnie, good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm good. Yeah, I think the biggest struggle, not struggle, but is stepping back from whether it's strangers or people that you love and not getting caught up in their stress, still being compassionate, and not taking it on as me, myself.
Yeah.
So I find that the Eightfold Path is remarkable. And I love the idea you've been talking about, and this sutta certainly expresses the idea that it's like a system. It's like our physical inner system. Everything works together. The framework works best when it works together. So it's not just one idea, that the one idea is supported by the other idea, and the other idea is supported by, the framework's like a ladder. And if you take one rung out, then it's not as strong. But so I'm grateful that it provides a way to name things and make suggestions and reminders to practice and be mindful whether I'm meditating or not. It's hard. I mean, I'm never gonna. I mean, at this point, I feel like if I could be fully awake for a second and not, and then awake and use it in my livelihood, it's really, really helped me also with my work. So. And my life, and it's put a bit of a conundrum in some of what I do, because if you look at the ego and what it requires and what it needs, it makes me feel different about what I need to do, when I need to do it, and how I need to do it. So, and it's a journey.
Thank you. As you start, or as you continue to develop the Eightfold Path, the ever more subtle levels of I-making become apparent, don't they? And you recognize it, and when you're ready and can, you simply abandon that aspect of I-making and continue. But we're always coming up against, if we're mindful, we're always coming up against that self-referential ego self until we're not anymore. So, Gail.
I just find I recognize it in other people so much. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I recognize it all the time. I'm like, oh, they're feeding their ego, or and I don't really judge it. I don't think I do, but I recognize it quite a bit, which I didn't before.
Comes in the mirror.
Yes, and that allows true compassion to arise, because then you really understand why other people are acting in a certain way. It's not because of you. Yeah, and we stop taking it personally because we understand it. That's true compassion. That's compassion married with wisdom, with understanding. Instead of blaming people for acting in a certain way, we recognize that maybe their behavior could be improved, but we accept it because it's what's occurring. We understand why it's occurring.
Blaming serves no purpose.
It doesn't, but does it? But the world kind of lives on blame, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Which what does that mean?
It's feeding their ego with somebody else, and that's their suffering.
Yeah.
It's the seagull thing, going to the higher post,
Well,
mine.
there's so many examples in the world of self-referential ego selves using certain behavior to get noticed and get a rise in other people and not other people, other self-referential ego selves. And you get, it's kind of like what I was talking about with Facebook, but you get these conflicts between something that's not even real. But in the end, in the end, the world could explode over these things that really have no basis in reality. It's all, but it all comes back to what the Buddha awakened to. It all comes back to not understanding ignorance and how that leads to certain types of behavior, self-referential behavior. That's the essence of it. Great discussions we have here. Liz, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to be here. I've been thinking a lot these days when I do sit to meditate about, what Lorna said about recognizing the stillness. And I think that helps in my sit in just giving myself permission to not fidget, whether it's in my body or my mind, to just experience that stillness. So I've been sort of carrying that with me. And like Bonnie said, it is a system, and it works best when it's worked together, so that if you do miss, if your routine for meditating isn't as strong, then you can start to see other things break down, and then when you pull it all back together again, it just, everything reinforces everything else. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
a shout out to Mary, who's listening in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, hi, Mary.
Mary.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Lorna, good to see you.
Good to be here. I was listening to a gentleman talking about who was coming up to retirement, and he was speaking about, just generally speaking about his career and how much he was looking forward to retiring. And the expression he used was that about his career and just working so hard for so long and wanting it all to stop. And he said that it all adds up, meaning, and I knew exactly what he meant, that you kind of bring everything with you. By the time you're up to retirement, you really want to stop. You just want to stop it. And that's the expression used, is that it all adds up. It just piles on and piles on and piles on. And then I really thought about what we taught here about the opportunity of the next moment. And just knowing that, it just gives you such a, well, it's just enlightening to know it, even if I haven't got there yet myself. I know there's an opportunity in the next moment that I can change that. Yeah. And just knowing that gives you a little bit of a different feel for life. And I didn't mention it to Wesley was talking, but I just had that flash of, that we're learning something really good here, really valuable, really valuable. Mm-hmm. And obviously you think, well, she could get everybody here, but anyway. So I had that sort of moment this week. And
could I say something?
Sure.
I hate to interrupt, but what we're doing here is the opposite of what he said.
Exactly.
Here, we all lay a little bit down.
That's right.
We just drop a little bit, we abandon a little bit. And instead of this increasing heaviness, there's this increasing lightness.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and then you think about the framework about your livelihood, and sometimes I can't, I can imagine not, but a lot of times I can't imagine not doing what I do, because, it's weird. I can't think, well, could I not? I don't know.
Well, the Buddha never, the fifth factor of the Eightfold Path is not no livelihood. It's right livelihood. It's bringing the framework of the Eightfold Path into whatever we're doing. You know, within those ethical guidelines too, of not causing any harm. But there's a lot of things that need to be done in the world. When they're done mindfully and within that right reference, the world is simply a much more peaceful and meaningful place to be. And we're all part of that, you know, as we develop this refined mindfulness. Lorna, did you have anything else to?
Well, another thing altogether. I find it helpful to think of a timeline, an imaginary timeline in my mind. And when I think about the timeline of the morning, of the day, of the week, of my life or something, I can see that the thoughts that I had in the past have no business being in the present. They've had their time.
Wow.
That's great.
That really is.
What I was doing and what I was thinking about, that was in that time.
Mhm.
And now I'm in the present time.
Yep.
And it makes it clear that there's no business being in the present time. So that and that helps me just keep focused and not go too much down the stories and all the mental stuff that we do. You know, I can just sort of like bring it back to base.
Give karma the boot.
Yeah. Give karma the boot.
Yeah. That's great. The past has no business in the present. It's beautiful. Thank you. Emily, good to see you tonight. How are you?
Good. I'm always happy to be here. Everyone always has some really good things to say, and the stories are always really good. Let's see. It's nice when things pop up in my life and I realize the stuff that I'm hearing here and learning here, I'm applying it to my life. It feels really good. And just something I remembered actually, I was getting cereal out of my cabinet, it was like yesterday or something, and I had like this invasive thought just coming into my head. And I remembered what Diane had said the first class I came to. I think that was her name, she's sitting over there.
Yep.
Back there, yeah. And she said, just take that breath to interrupt the thought. So I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, I'm learning stuff here. And there's been a few times where, since we're creatures of habit, it's hard for me to like put the meditation into my life. I'm still wrestling with that. But there's been a few times where I remember, oh, I should meditate now, and I'll close my eyes, and it won't last long. But at least, I get like a few breaths in there. And I remember to, push out those thoughts. But it wasn't until I decided that I had to make changes in my life that the want to be around different types of people that were trying to do the next right thing really came to me and how important it was. So, that's where it started with me. And I did have to like cut some people out of my life that I saw that just wasn't, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for them because, rather than I never really knew how to like stand up for what was right or myself. And I realized that it was hurting them by kind of just going along with that and not allowing the disharmony. I thought that it was keeping the harmony by just agreeing with them, but it was really causing more, disharmony. But I wanted to say that because I always thought that I was doing the right thing, and then when I took first look at myself, I saw that I wasn't, and then it made me want to be around, people that were trying harder, more aware of what they were doing. So that's just what popped into my head when you were reading. Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you. Those are really profound realizations, especially the understanding that often our associations can give approval where we shouldn't be giving approval just by being there, by offering even that type of support by association can be, in general, can end up being hurtful. And seeing that the uncomfortability that comes from withdrawing is just a consequence of something, and it needs to be done. Recognizing that when you're caught up in your thinking, or caught up in anything, caught up in thinking about your cereal, come back to your breath is really the essence of what we take off our cushion. We're interrupting in our meditation sessions, we're interrupting that conditioned thinking of following one thought immediately with the next. But off our cushion, that concentration leads to that thought that I can come out of this right now, just take a breath. So good for you. And it just gets, that concentration just deepens as your practice deepens. So you're doing it all right. Short meditation sessions, if you can do twice a day, but consistently, even if it's just for a minute to get into the practice, is much more important than thinking, I don't have 10 minutes to sit right now, but everybody has a minute that they can sit and just do that. Glad you're here tonight. Any other questions or comments on tonight's class?
Well, I forgot the one I had before, but I was thinking, actually, when I did the reading, I was thinking, I don't know, it's just like being with people who are not like you, like skillful people, or I forget how you put it, like being with the right kinds of people. You don't always want to avoid the unskillful people, right? Like you can still confront them in a non-confrontational way and kind of be honest with them, and maybe they'll change a little bit, or so you don't want to just stay away from people like that.
No, associations is another word for associations is clinging. So simply by being with someone doesn't mean that you're associating with them.
So I wasn't thinking of this.
Yeah, are you creating a kind of an internal self-referential view with your associations? That's clinging. But simply being with another group of people or an individual is not associating. Are you creating an identity by it? That's really what it comes down to. So we don't avoid anything that comes up. We might make certain choices, like, I stopped hanging out in bars when I quit drinking. I mean, that's, and initially that was difficult. I was told that if you want to stop drinking, you got to stop hanging around with people that drink. Well, everybody I knew drank or did drugs at the time. It was, at that point, it was really difficult to not call up my friends and hang out with them and think that somehow I was going to not take drugs or drink with them. But I had to, I mean, I'm just using that as an example. But in anything we're doing, think about the qualities that people are developing and expressing. Is that something that I want to associate with? If it isn't, it doesn't mean you can't be with that person at all ever again in your life. But you'll recognize when you're creating an association by that. One of the reasons why a well-focused Sangha works so well is because we're mutually supportive in this very gentle way, that we're all doing the same thing. We're all living a life that is framed by the Eightfold Path, and it's mutually supportive. It's a skillful association. Thank you for bringing that up. It's important. Any other questions or comments? Next Tuesday is the Dana dinner. I hope you'll all be there. Info on crossrivermeditation.com if you need it. But everyone's invited.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock at Love and Oven. Bring a dish to share if you can, and maybe a practical gift. There's a list of that on the website too. I think we have quite a few people that are coming to help set up and clean up. But along the way, if you maybe help clean up at the end of the night, that'd be great. So, I think that's the end of the announcements for tonight. We'll finish with Metta, like we always.
John, are you also collecting just a little bit of money to give?
Oh yeah, there's a basket out there that we are just to reimburse Love and Oven to pay for the staff there, and we're going to buy. And actually, I already bought it some paper plates and water, juice, and that kind of stuff. So anything you can leave in the basket would be appreciated. So we'll finish with Metta, as we always do. So find your relaxed meditative posture, and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body, and let that mindfulness of your breath cease any distracting thoughts to the past or to the future, or that may have arisen from our talk tonight. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class. Peace. How's Judy, Andrew?
Fine. Explanation was a little overwhelmed with work, so I had to